I want to ask you about this debate that we're seeing over critical race theory. Do you think Republican efforts to redefine it and use it as a scare tactic, do you think it's working?
Well, I do think it's working because what we have seen is that the Republican base and the Republican Party has really pivoted to a strategy of using race and using just the changing demographics of this country. And as we saw on January 6th, using a white supremacist core logic in order to reanimate a very core fear in this country of the other. And so what's really important is that we come together and have a very strong rebuttal to that core logic, not just in fact-checking Republican claims, but actually confronting the core logic and addressing the core fears that they are trying to really tap into when they try to use terms like critical race theory as a proxy for just talking about race in schools in general.
You know, in places like Texas and elsewhere, really, we're seeing bills banning teaching of critical race theory paired with laws making it harder for minorities to vote. Why do you think this is all being pushed at once? Do you think that, first of all, maybe I think that this critical race theory is to win back some of the folks in the suburbs, educated white people and what the best way to do that is to give them fears about their children.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's certainly a strategy that they have. And in order to do that, you know, especially at a school level and a school board level in some states and municipalities, is how they can really try to work to reanimate that base. And it's not an accident that they're using race as the core, and that we're seeing this paired with a very strong push to essentially disenfranchise and limit the right to vote, as well as the Supreme Court continuing to gut the Voting Rights Act. And when we say how we counter this, it's not just fact-checking in some of those, you know, basic claims, which, you know, is still important to do. Critical race theory is not taught in elementary school. It is barely taught in law schools, frankly, in the level that it should be taught. But beyond that, because we know that Republicans have started to now use these laws curtailing critical race, quote unquote, curriculum that's not even being taught in the first place as a proxy to saying we can't teach anything about race in our schools beyond just some of the most minimal facts.
Well, some of
that, I think.
Go on, finish your thought, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and to that, we should say, why don't you want our schools to teach anti-racism? Why don't Republicans want their kids to know the tradition of anti-racism in the United States? Why are Republicans trying to ban books in this country? Why are Republicans trying to ban speech? Why are they trying to fire certain professors? Why are they attacking the core roots of history in this country that strays anything beyond what we already know? In fact, you have folks like Kevin McCarthy making statements that sound like he's never even read Martin Luther King in his life, trying to ban books that actually talk about the history of the civil rights movement and institutional racism in the United States. So why don't Republicans want us to learn how to not be racist? Why don't Republicans want kids to know how to not be racist?
Well, they're saying it's too young, and
it makes the question that illuminates this.
They said that it's too young, and it makes it makes white kids feel bad, and it gives them guilt about being white at too young of an age, or that they shouldn't have that or be taught that guilt at all, or anything that gives them that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think here's the deal. Here's something that we know neurocognitively. Babies, when they are exposed to family members, neighborhoods, etc., of one race, their eye contact, we already know this from neuroscientists and neurosociology, etc., sociologists, etc., that babies already start to gravitate towards members of their own race when they are disproportionately exposed to just one race in their life. It doesn't mean that babies are racist, but what it means is that we already start to gravitate to communities and people that we already know are already acclimated to. Children do not feel guilt about racism when they learn early on what racism is. In fact, children learn to recognize it and can engage in corrective behavior early. Now, what does feel guilty are the adults who allow racism to happen in their lives, and when their children acknowledge it better than some of the adults in their lives do. And so to that, I don't think that children feel guilty. I think there's a responsible way for us to talk about how to be peaceful and treat each other with respect. And Republicans are using these words like critical race theory, which again is a law school curricula that is not even taught in schools. And their argument is, well, some teachers may be exposed to it. Oh, wow, so your child's teacher is anti-racist and is actually fluent in how to dismantle racism and the dynamics of racism in a classroom. Yeah. That is something that teachers should know how to do. And Republicans are trying to ban this, are trying to ban us from knowing our own history, because if we don't know our own history, then it is easier for them to ban, it is easier for them to curtail our rights to vote and to essentially take us backwards to the 1960s, as they have been doing with many of these state laws.
Congresswoman,